In a small village, a couple was famous for their incredible health. Despite the husband being 102 and the wife 98, they still worked their farm every day and looked decades younger. One day, a visitor, amazed by their vitality, approached the old man who was chopping wood shirtless, muscles gleaming in the sun. "Excuse me, sir, but is it true you're 102? "That's right," the old man replied with a grin. "Incredible. You're in better shape than most men half your age. What's your secret?" The old man chuckled. "Help me carry this wood inside, and I'll tell you." Once inside, he explained, "I've been married for 75 years, and early on my wife and I made a deal. Whoever loses an argument has to run 5 kilometers and, well, like any normal husband, I've been running almost every day for 75 years. The visitor laughed. "That explains you, but what about your wife? She's just as fit." The old man smirked. "Oh, she runs too. Usually right behind me, making sure I don't cut corners." An elderly woman walked into a store that sold jade but also stocked some produce. She approached the shop owner and said, "I'd like 7 kilograms of potatoes, please." The owner happily started packing them up when she suddenly stopped him. "Oh, and please wrap each one individually." A bit puzzled but obliging, he carefully wrapped every potato. "Anything else, madam?" he asked. "Yes, 4 kilograms of onions, also wrapped individually." Suppressing a sigh, the owner painstakingly wrapped each onion and packed them neatly. "And?" he asked, bracing himself. 7 kilograms of carrots, please." He rubbed his temples. "Let me guess, individually wrapped? Oh, that would be lovely." She beamed. Gritting his teeth, the owner wrapped each carrot with forced patience. After handing over the heavy bag of meticulously wrapped produce, he hoped that was the end of it. The woman glanced behind him and asked, "Oh, what's in those crates?" The owner turned red. "Madam, those are grapes, and they are not for sale." A widower, newly retired, bought a house near a high school. His first few weeks were peaceful, until the new school year began. Every afternoon, 3 boys marched down the street, gleefully banging on every bin they passed. This went on for a week before the old man decided it was time to act. One afternoon, he stepped outside and greeted them with a smile. "You boys remind me of myself at your age. Tell you what, I'll pay each of you $1 if you come by every day and keep up the racket." Thrilled to be paid for their mischief, the boys eagerly agreed. After a few days, the man came out again looking troubled. "Fellas, this recession is hitting my wallet hard. I can only afford 50 cents per person now." The boys grumbled, but they kept banging the bins. A few days later, the man sighed. "Times are tough, boys. From now on, I can only pay you 25 cents each." The leader scoffed. "What? You expect us to make all this noise for just 25 cents? Forget it, we quit." And from that day on, the old man enjoyed peace and quiet for the rest of his days. An elderly man accidentally rear-ends a flashy sports car. Furious, the young driver jumps out, glaring at the damage. "Look what you did to my car!" he yells. "You're going to give me $10,000 right now or I'll beat you to a pulp!" The old man sighs. "Oh dear, I don't have that kind of money. But let me call my son. He trains dolphins. He'll know what to do." "Dolphins?" The guy scoffs, rolling his eyes. The old man pulls out his phone, dials his son, but before he can speak, the angry man snatches it away. "So you're a dolphin trainer, huh?" He sneers. "Well, your old man just wrecked my car. I need 10 grand now, or I'm gonna beat both of you to a pulp. Maybe you can train your dolphins to fetch some cash." A calm voice on the other end replies, "I'll be there in 10 minutes. Exactly 10 minutes later, a pickup truck pulls up. A massive man steps out and walks toward the bully. Before the guy can react, the newcomer headbutts him so hard he crumples like a rag doll. The big man casually catches him, lays him in a heap by the road, then turns to the old man. "For the last time, Dad, I train seals, Navy SEALs, not dolphins." On her 70th birthday, a little old lady checked into a motel feeling a bit lonely. She thought, why not spice things up? So she flipped through the phone book and found a full-page ad for a man calling himself Tender Tony. The ad showed a tall, chiseled hunk flexing. All the right muscles in all the right places, thick, wavy hair, powerful legs, a dazzling smile, and 6-pack abs. I bet I could bounce a quarter off that butt, she mused. Figuring she had nothing to lose, she dialed the number. A deep, sensual voice answered. "Good evening, ma'am. How may I help you?" Her heart raced. Oh my, she thought, that voice. Afraid she'd chicken out, she blurted, "Listen, I want to be honest with you. I'm in town alone and I want **X. Hot, wild, and now. Bring rubber, leather, whips, your whole bag of tricks. Tie me up, cover me in chocolate syrup and whipped cream. Anything goes. We're going all night. How does that sound?" There was a brief pause. Then the voice calmly replied, "Ma'am, you need to press 9 for an outside line." Mitch was having a terrible day at the racetrack, losing bet after bet when he noticed something unusual. Before the fourth race, an old priest stepped onto the track and gently blessed the forehead of one of the horses. Curious, Mitch watched as the race began, and to his amazement, the blessed horse, an absolute long shot, won. Before the fifth race, Mitch kept his eyes on the priest. Sure enough, he blessed another horse. Wasting no time, Mitch placed a small bet on it. Boom! Another long-shot victory. By the sixth race, Mitch was convinced he had stumbled onto a divine betting strategy. When the priest blessed a horse, Mitch went all in, and once again it won. Race after race, the pattern continued. Mitch's pockets grew heavier with each win, and by the final race, he was riding high. This is it, he thought. I'm about to be rich. He sprinted to the ATM, withdrew every last cent he had, and waited. For the final race, the priest stepped onto the track and blessed another horse. An old, tired-looking nag, but this time the priest didn't stop at the forehead. He blessed the horse's eyes, ears, hooves, the whole deal. Mitch's heart pounded. This is the big one. He emptied his entire bankroll on the nag. The gates opened, the race began, and the horse ran like it had bricks tied to its hooves. It didn't just lose, it came in dead last. Shocked, broke, and devastated, Mitch stormed down to the track and confronted the priest. "Father, what happened? Every horse you blessed today won. And then, in the last race, the one you blessed lost by a Kentucky mile. I just lost everything." The priest gave him a sympathetic nod and sighed. "Son, that's the problem with most people. You can't tell the difference between a simple blessing and last rites." Mitch was having a terrible day at the racetrack, losing bet after bet when he noticed something unusual. Before the fourth race, an old priest stepped onto the track and gently blessed the forehead of one of the horses. Curious, Mitch watched as the race began, and to his amazement, the blessed horse, an absolute long shot, won. Before the fifth race, Mitch kept his eyes on the priest. Sure enough, he blessed another horse. Wasting no time, Mitch placed a small bet on it. Boom! Another long-shot victory. By the sixth race, Mitch was convinced he had stumbled onto a divine betting strategy. When the priest blessed a horse, Mitch went all in, and once again it won. Race after race, the pattern continued. Mitch's pockets grew heavier with each win, and by the final race, he was riding high. This is it, he thought. I'm about to be rich. He sprinted to the ATM, withdrew every last cent he had, and waited. For the final race, the priest stepped onto the track and blessed another horse. An old, tired-looking nag, but this time the priest didn't stop at the forehead. He blessed the horse's eyes, ears, hooves, the whole deal. Mitch's heart pounded. This is the big one. He emptied his entire bankroll on the nag. The gates opened, the race began, and the horse ran like it had bricks tied to its hooves. It didn't just lose, it came in dead last. Shocked, broke, and devastated, Mitch stormed down to the track and confronted the priest. "Father, what happened? Every horse you blessed today won. And then, in the last race, the one you blessed lost by a Kentucky mile. I just lost everything." The priest gave him a sympathetic nod and sighed. "Son, that's the problem with most people. You can't tell the difference between a simple blessing and last rites." A priest and a nun are traveling to a distant monastery when their car breaks down in the middle of nowhere during a raging blizzard. They manage to find an old, abandoned cabin for shelter. Inside, they discover a bed, a sleeping bag, and a small pile of blankets. Being a gentleman, the priest offers the nun the bed while he takes the sleeping bag on the floor. As they settle in for the night, the nun calls out, "Father, Father, I'm cold!" The priest gets up, grabs a blanket, and tucks it around her. "Is that better, sister?" "Yes, Father, much better," she replies. He crawls back into his sleeping bag, but just as he's drifting off, "Father, I'm still cold." With a sigh, the priest gets up again, fetches another blanket, and carefully tucks her in. "There, sister. Warmer now?" "Oh, yes, Father, much better," she assures him. So he settles back into his sleeping bag, determined to sleep at last. But just as dreams start to take him, "Father, I'm so cold." The priest pauses, thinking it over. Then in a calm voice he says, "Sister, we're stranded in the middle of nowhere in the dead of winter. It's just you, me, and the Lord who will ever know what happens here tonight. How about, just for this one night, we act as if we're married?" The nun considers this for a long moment. Finally, she gives a small nod. "All right, Father, just for tonight. We'll act as if we're married." The priest smiles warmly. "Wonderful. Now get up and get your own damn blanket." A distinguished young woman on a flight from Switzerland turned to the priest seated beside her and asked, "Father, may I ask a favor?" The priest, a kind and attentive man, replied, "Of course, my child. What is it you wish of me?" "Well," she began, "I bought an expensive electronic hairdryer that exceeds the customs limits, and I'm afraid they might confiscate it. Is there any chance you could carry it through customs for me? Perhaps under your robes." The priest thought for a moment and said, "I would love to help you, my dear, but I must warn you I cannot lie." With a sweet smile, the woman assured him, "With your honest face, Father, no one will suspect a thing." When they arrived at customs, the woman let the priest go ahead of her. The customs officer asked the priest, "Father, do you have anything to declare?" The priest answered, "From the top of my head to my waist, I have nothing to declare." The officer was a bit confused and asked, "And what do you have to declare from your waist to the floor?" The priest paused for a moment and replied, "I have a marvelous little instrument designed for a woman, but as of now it's still unused." The officer couldn't help but burst out laughing and said, "Go ahead, Father. Next." 3 couples went to see the minister to inquire about joining his church. The minister told them, "To become members, you must go without making love for 2 months, then come back and tell me how it went." 2 months later, the couples returned. The first couple, both retired, said it was no problem at all. The second couple, middle-aged, admitted it was tough the first month, but after that it wasn't too bad. The final couple, the newlyweds, looked a little sheepish. The minister asked, "What happened?" The husband hesitated before replying, "Well, everything was fine until my wife dropped a can of paint." "A can of paint?" the minister exclaimed in disbelief. "Yeah," the husband continued. "She bent over to pick it up and, well, I just couldn't help myself. Lust took over." The minister shook his head in disapproval. "You two are not welcome in my church." The husband grinned and said, "That's okay, Father. We're not welcome at Home Depot either." A lady goes to her parish priest one day and says, "Father, I have a problem. I have 2 female parrots, but they only know how to say one thing." The priest asks, "What do they say?" The lady sighs and replies, "They say, 'Hi, we're prostitutes. Do you want to have some fun?'" "That's obscene," the priest exclaims. "I can see why you're embarrassed." He thinks for a moment and then says, "I may have a solution. I have 2 male parrots who have been trained to pray and read the Bible. Bring your parrots over to my house, and I'll put them in the same cage with Francis and Job. My parrots will teach yours to praise and worship, and I'm sure they'll stop saying, well, that phrase." "Thank you, Father. This may just be the solution." The woman responds, relieved. The next day, she brings her parrots to the priest's house. As he ushers her in, she sees the 2 male parrots in their cage, holding rosary beads and praying. Impressed, she places her parrots in the cage with them. Almost immediately, the female parrots squawk in unison. "Hi, we're prostitutes. Do you want to have some fun?" There's a stunned silence. Finally, one of the male parrots looks over at the other and says, "Put the beads away, Francis. Our prayers have been answered." 4 members of the clergy were having a theological debate, with the 3 male ministers arguing against the 1 female minister. After a while, the woman prayed, "Lord, I know I'm right. Please send us a divine sign to prove my point." Suddenly, a storm cloud appeared, followed by a loud clap of thunder. "See," the woman said, "it's a sign from above." The three men disagreed, saying thunder was just a natural occurrence. "Dear Lord," the woman prayed again, "I need a bigger sign." This time, a bolt of lightning struck a nearby tree. "See, I told you I was right," the woman exclaimed, but the men insisted that nothing had happened that couldn't be explained by science. Desperate, the woman cried, "Help me, Lord!" And then a deep voice from the heavens boomed, "She's right!" The woman turned to the three clergymen and asked, "Well?" The men, after a moment of stunned silence, reluctantly replied, Okay, but it's still 3 against 2. A young boy goes to confess his sins to the priest. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. I've been with a loose girl." The priest asks, "Is that you, little Joey Pagano?" "Yes, Father, it is." "And who was the girl you were with?" "I can't tell you, Father. I don't want to ruin her reputation." The priest insists, "Well, Joey, I'm sure I'll find out eventually, so you might as well tell me now." "Was it Tina Minetti?" "I cannot say, Father." "Was it Nancy Connor?" "I'll never tell." "Was it Judy Cohen?" "I'm sorry, Father, but I cannot name her." "Was it Kate Tequeno?" "My lips are sealed." "Was it Rose DeMarco then?" "Please, Father, I cannot tell you." The priest sighs in frustration. "You're very tight-lipped, and I admire that, but you've sinned, and you must atone. You can't be an altar boy for 4 months. Now go and behave yourself." Joey walks back to his pew, and his friend Franco leans over and whispers, "What'd you get?" Joey gives a sly smile and says, "A 4-month vacation and 5 good leads." It was Tim Simmons's retirement dinner. He had lived a long, remarkable life. At just 25, he went on a mission trip to South America, where he met 2 young boys who he later adopted. The stark differences in living conditions led him to study medicine, a field he excelled in. Over the years, Tim developed vaccines for over 10 diseases, and despite his success, he donated most of his earnings to relief efforts for the places he had visited. His co-workers adored him, and everyone who knew him would agree that he was the most positive and bright person they'd ever met. So during his retirement dinner, when an angel descended from heaven to speak with him, no one was surprised. "You have lived a life of service, one that many look up to and depend on. Because of this, we'd like to grant you a gift, a long and healthy life, unimaginable wealth, or unparalleled wisdom," the angel said. Tim thought for only a moment, and without hesitation, he chose unparalleled wisdom. The angel touched his forehead and departed, leaving the room in stunned silence. Finally, his closest friend spoke up. "Well, how do you feel?" Tim paused, contemplating the question for a few seconds. Then he shrugged, glanced around at his stunned co-workers, and said, "I should have chosen the bloody money." 2 little boys walk into a grocery store. One is 9, the other is 4. The older boy picks up a box of tampons and carries it to the counter. The cashier asks, "Oh, these must be for your mom, right?" The 9-year-old replies, "Nope, not for my mom." The cashier, a bit surprised, asks, "Well then, are they for your sister?" "Nope, not for her either," the boy responds. Curiosity piqued, the cashier asks, "Then who are they for?" The boy looks at her and says, "They're for my little brother." "Your little brother? Why?" the cashier asks, baffled. The 9-year-old replies, "Well, on TV they say if you wear one of these, you can do all sorts of things, like swim, run fast, or ride a bike, and my little brother can't do any of those things." A nurse at a care home was making her rounds when she glanced into one of the rooms. To her shock, she saw an elderly woman kissing on her husband's package. She quickly stepped inside. "Mrs. Phillips, you can't do that." The old lady looked up innocently. "Why not? I've always enjoyed it." The nurse sighed. "Yes, ma'am, but it was meant to be buried with the rest of him." A rabbi and a priest meet up after not seeing each other for a year. The rabbi looks the priest up and down and says, "Wow, you've put on some weight." The priest chuckles. "Yeah, I've discovered a new technique. You go to a restaurant, eat as much as you can. When the bill comes, you tell them you already paid." The rabbi raises an eyebrow. But the waiter won't believe you, right? Of course not, the priest replies. That's when you say, "How dare you doubt a man of faith? Works like a charm, you can just walk out." The rabbi strokes his beard. Interesting. I think I'll try this. That evening, the rabbi heads to his favorite kosher restaurant. He feasts on 5 full plates, then waits for the bill. When the waiter brings it over, the rabbi calmly says, "Oh, I already paid." The waiter frowns. "I'm pretty sure you didn't, sir." The rabbi leans in. "You know I'm a rabbi. How dare you doubt a man of faith?" The waiter hesitates, then bows apologetically. "Oh, my mistake, Rabbi. Please have a wonderful evening." 15 minutes pass, then 30, then 45. An hour later, the waiter notices the rabbi still sitting at the table. Curious, he approaches. "Sir, why are you still here?" The rabbi leans back, folds his arms, and says with a smile, "I'm waiting for my change." 2 priests decide to go to Goa for a vacation. This time, they're determined to truly relax, blending in as regular people without anything that would identify them as priests. As soon as the plane lands, they rush to a store and buy the most outrageous beachwear they can find. Loud shirts, shorts, sandals, sunglasses, the works. The next morning, they proudly head to the beach in their new tourist outfits, eager to enjoy some time in the sun without anyone recognizing them. They settle into their beach chairs, drinks in hand, taking in the sights. Just then, a stunning blonde in a bikini walks right up to them. They can't help but stare, and as she passes by, she smiles and greets them individually. "Good morning, Father," and then to the other, "Good morning, Father." Both priests are stunned. How on earth did she know they were priests? The next day, they go back to the store and buy even more outrageous outfits. If anything, these are even louder, so bright you can hear them before you see them. Once again, they settle on the beach, hoping to finally blend in. And once again, the same gorgeous blonde walks by, now in a different bikini. She nods at each priest, saying, "Good morning, Father," and "Good morning, Father." This time, one of the priests can't take it anymore. He calls out, "Just a minute, young lady." The blonde turns around. "Yes, Father?" With genuine confusion, the priest asks, "We're priests, but how in the world do you know that, dressed like this?" She smiles and replies, "Father, it's me, Sister Philomena." A man was called to testify at the IRS and asked his accountant for advice on what to wear. The accountant said, "Wear your most shabby clothes, make them think you're a pauper." The man, still unsure, went to his lawyer, who gave the opposite advice. "Don't let them intimidate you. Wear your most expensive suit and tie." Confused, the man turned to his priest and explained the conflicting advice. The priest thought for a moment and then said, "Let me tell you a story. A woman about to get married asked her mother what to wear on her wedding night. Her mother told her, 'Wear a long, heavy flannel nightgown that covers you up to the neck.' But when she asked her best friend, she got a totally different response. 'Wear your sexiest negligee with a deep V-neck that shows off everything.' The man, still puzzled, asked, 'What does this have to do with my IRS problem?' The priest smiled and said, 'It doesn't matter what you wear. You're going to get screwed either way.' One November afternoon, I picked my daughter up from kindergarten. She eagerly crawled into the back seat, and I asked, 'What did you do today?' 'We learned that boys are different from girls,' she said excitedly. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror, barely able to see the top of her head. 'What do you mean?' I asked, trying to keep things casual. She smiled brightly. 'My teacher told us that boys have a thing and girls don't.' I froze, unsure how to respond. 'Well, yes, they do,' I said cautiously. We sat in silence for a moment, and then she added, 'That's how girls know boys are boys, because of that thing that hangs down.' I mentally calculated the drive home. The usual 5-minute commute now felt like an eternity. She continued, 'Did you know when boys see a girl, they puff up?' My palms began to sweat. Well," I stammered, still grasping for anything to steer the conversation in another direction, but she wasn't done. "Why do the girls like the boys to have those things?" she asked. I stopped. I mean, what woman hasn't asked herself that question at least once? Well, I hesitated, but she didn't need me to answer. She had her own explanation. It's 'cause it moves when they walk. The girls see it and they know he's a boy. Then the boy sees the girl and he puffs up, and she knows he likes her too, and then they get married. And then they get cooked. That last part threw me off a bit, but overall, I had to admit she had a pretty good grasp of things. As soon as we pulled into the driveway, she hopped out of the car and pulled something from her school bag. "I drew a picture. Do you want to see?" I wasn't sure I did, but I took a look anyway. I had to sit down. There, all puffed up, looking irresistible to the ladies, was a crayon drawing of a big tom turkey. His snood, the thing that hangs down over his beak, was magnificent. His tail feathers were standing tall and proud. I couldn't help but laugh. She looked a bit offended at first, but when I told her I loved it, which I did, she got over it. That was the end of that conversation, for her anyway. But every year since, I can't help but think of it. And to be honest, I've never looked at a turkey, or a man, the same way again. A woman joins a country club and overhears some guys talking about their golf game. She chimes in, "I used to play for my college's golf team. I was pretty good. Mind if I join you next week?" The guys are a bit hesitant, but no one wants to say no. So one man finally says, "Okay, but we start at 6:30 a.m. He hopes the early tea time will discourage her. She hesitates for a moment, then asks, "Is it okay if I'm up to 15 minutes late?" They roll their eyes, but reluctantly agree. The woman shows up at 6:30 a.m. sharp, plays an incredible 2-under-par round, and beats every one of them. She's friendly and pleasant, and the guys are thoroughly impressed. They congratulate her and invite her back the following week. She smiles and replies, "I'll be there at 6:30 or 6:45. The next week, she shows up right on time at 6:30 a.m., and this time she plays left-handed. The guys are floored as she still beats them with an even par round. They can't figure out how she's doing it, but they're amazed by her skill. She's gracious, compliments their good shots, and the guys can't help but invite her back. The third week, she arrives 15 minutes late, which irritates the guys. This time, she plays right-handed and barely beats them, keeping the competition tight. The guys mutter to themselves, thinking the late arrival is a little game of hers, but she's so charming and complimentary that they can't stay mad at her. Afterward, they grab a couple of beers at the clubhouse, and one man finally asks, "How do you decide whether to play right-handed or left-handed?" She blushes, then grins and says, "Well, I'm ambidextrous. It depends on how my husband sleeps. Before I leave in the morning for golf practice, I pull the covers off him. If his willie's pointing to the right, I golf right-handed. If it's pointing to the left, I golf left-handed." The guys burst out laughing, but one of them, still curious, asks, "What if it's pointing straight up?" She winks and says, "Then I'm 15 minutes late." The FBI had an open position for an assassin, and after conducting thorough background checks, interviews, and skill tests, they narrowed it down to 3 candidates. They brought the final candidates in to test their abilities. Each one passed the exams with flying colors. For the last test, the FBI agents led the first man to a large metal door and handed him a gun. "We need to know that you will follow orders no matter the circumstances," they explained. "Inside this room is your wife sitting in a chair. Your task is to kill her." The man stared at them in disbelief. "You can't be serious. I could never shoot my wife." The agent sighed. "Then you're not the right person for the job. Take your wife and go home." The second man was given the same instructions. He entered the room with the gun, and after about 5 minutes, he came out with tears in his eyes. "I tried," he said, "but I just couldn't do it." The agent shook his head. "You don't have what it takes. Take your wife home." Finally, the last candidate, a woman, was given the same instructions. She entered the room with the gun. Moments later, they heard multiple shots followed by crashing and loud banging on the walls. After a few minutes, everything went quiet. The door creaked open, and there stood the woman, drenched in sweat and looking exhausted. "Some joker loaded the gun with blanks," she said, panting. "I had to do it the hard way." A man and his wife are having a heated discussion about who should brew the coffee each morning. The wife says, You should do it since you get up first, and that way we won't have to wait as long for our coffee. The husband responds, No, you should do it. You're in charge of the cooking, and I can just wait for my coffee. The wife insists, No, really, you should do it. And anyway, it says in the Bible that the man should make the coffee. The husband, baffled, exclaims, What? I can't believe that. Show me. So the wife fetches the Bible, opens the New Testament, and points to several pages where at the top it clearly says, Hebrews.